This clip is hilarious to me. Ben Shapiro was talking about Build Back Better and Joe Biden and how, oh my God, this is going to add to the deficit and it's so bad. And what about inflation? And so he's talking about all these things. And at the end of the clip, he makes an awesome comparison. Watch.
They're always looking for an excuse to do the thing they wanted to do anyway. So anytime something bad happens in life, this administration immediately jumps to, we need more regulation and we need more top-down control. COVID, more regulation, more top-down control. A tornado in Kentucky, more regulation, more top-down control. It's always the same solution. Okay, if you went to a doctor and no matter what symptoms you complained of, he offered you morphine, you might start to think that maybe the guy was a drug pusher. Well, that is what you've got right now. You've got a government that is offering the same solution to every problem. So either you believe that this solution really is the gold standard, the all-purpose solution, or it turns out that these people are just pushing an addictive drug of spending and regulation, regardless of the first part of the statement. Regardless of the contingency, the solution is always the same.
This is the most obvious case of projection I've ever seen. Because it's the Republicans who have the same answer to absolutely everything. And what is their answer? I don't even need to say it. A lot of you can think of it right off the top of your head. Deregulation, more tax cuts. And by the way, when they say tax cuts, if you look at their actual proposals, it's more tax cuts for the wealthy than for working people. No matter what the problem is, deregulate, so cut the red tape, and more tax cuts. That's always their answer. So everything he says there that the Democrats are guilty of, it's actually the Republicans that are guilty of it. And by the way, on the side of the Democrats, I don't even know what he's talking about, claiming that Biden says we need more regulation, more top-down control. Like what? Give me an example. By the way, the conversation here is about Build Back Better. How is that more regulation? That's not more regulation. It's not even more top-down control. It's bottom-up control, you could argue, because the provisions in there are 60, 70, 80% supported. So universal pre-K, universal child care, expanding Medicare. That's more bottom-up than top-down because it's what the people actually want. And how is that regulation? That's not regulation. That's the government providing basic services with our tax money. That's the government actually representing the American people. But I love the morphine thing. The morphine thing is wonderful. First of all, morphine, based as fuck. Anybody who's ever had an injury and gone to the hospital and had morphine was like, shit, this stuff works. I feel amazing even though my leg is broken. Second of all, if it's Democrats who are pushing morphine and that's their answer to everything, well, pushing morphine as an answer to everything is way better than what the Republicans are pushing, which is snake oil. Your answer to everything is snake oil. And that does Dickie McGee's axe. That does nothing substantively. So I would much rather have morphine than I would a genuine, true painkiller than I would snake oil, which is just a scam product, which doesn't address anything. The rest of the segment, he talks about Build Back Better, and he keeps conflating this with, oh my God, inflation, inflation, inflation. That's an amazing sleight of hand on the part of Ben Shapiro, because people's default assumption, mine included, when I originally started looking into this problem, is that, oh my God, it must have been the COVID relief packages and the big spending which is leading to inflation. Well, the more I ask economists and experts and people who actually know what they're talking about what the root problem of inflation is, the more they told me it has nothing to do with the spending bills. It has everything to do with the supply chain. So as a direct result of COVID, as a direct result of these monumental shifts in the economy, where people are staying home and ordering way more online, the economy wasn't ready to handle that. And so between PPE being delivered to various countries and clogging the ports, and online orders massively increasing, clogging the ports, and not having enough drivers because basically the drivers are indentured servants. We know that from some great investigative reporting that came out a while ago. Crystal Ball did a great piece on that. You have not enough goods. So the problem is on the good side of the equation. So what's one way to address that? One way to address that is bring back American manufacturing so that you have more goods. So that's one thing. The other thing is we've covered stories. Walmart's one great example, but there are many others as well. Now corporations are using inflation as an excuse to jack prices even for goods that the price actually isn't going up. That's why corporate profits right now are at a record high. So he's just being lazy and sloppy, or he's lying on purpose when he's acting like the big spending is leading to inflation. That's just not true. Don't take my word for it. You go do your own fact checking and reading about it, and you'll find out very quickly This is what every expert is saying. It has way more to do with, number one, the supply chain and the problems in the supply chain. And number two, with corporations taking advantage of the fear-mongering over inflation to jack prices anyway and boost profits. Okay, now to get to the... You didn't see this part in the clip, but he talked about it earlier in the clip. Oh my God, the deficit, the big spending. Ben Shapiro enthusiastically supported the Trump tax cuts, which added trillions of dollars to the deficit. So notice, and did he say a word when we spent $7 to $8 trillion on the military budget? By the way, weird, whenever they talk about Build Back Better, everybody projects it over a 10-year period. And they say, oh, it's a $3.5 trillion bill, or now $1.9 trillion bill, or whatever. That's for a decade. But when we talk about the military bill, they narrow the window to a year, so it sounds less scary. $768 billion. So notice the sleights of hand and the way they rig the conversation to make certain things appear more reasonable and certain things to appear insane. They want any social spending for the actual people in this country to appear pie in the sky, insane, ridiculous, price tag too large, and they want all the military spending to appear perfectly reasonable and on the up and up. It's not. It's the exact opposite. So the real amount over a 10-year period, if we're going to do an apples-to-apples comparison, is $7 to $8 trillion on the military. Did Ben Shapiro say a goddamn word about how we're going to pay for it and what about the deficit? No. Because in his mind, he says, look, this is a moral necessity. What are we going to do? National defense is very important. You know what else is important, Ben? Childcare. You know what else is important? Universal pre-K. You know what else is important? Expanding Medicare so more people have health care, dental, vision, hearing coverage. That is a moral necessity. That is an ethical necessity. You don't think so. You'd rather fearmonger over that and talk about the deficit, this abstract problem, than talk about the real lives impacted by a bill that would help them tremendously. So, anytime anybody bitches about the deficit, if they've never said a word about the deficit in regards to tax cuts for the wealthy, if they've never said a word about the deficit in regards to the military, immediately dismiss anything they're saying about the debt and the deficit. Because it is a trick, or at the very least, they have fallen for the same trick and they parrot it like lemmings. Because it's not a real concern. It's just an attempt to stymie any movement in the right direction by raising any objection you possibly can. For the love of God, Joe Manchin, who's standing in the way now, of course, he's a Republican who is a Democrat in name, he was like, oh my God, I can't, look at how much it adds to the deficit. We can't do this Build Back Better bill. Now, previously he gave his word, we're going to do the Build Back Better bill. Then he's like, okay, it's inflation, deficit, something. He's saying, oh my God, it adds so much to the deficit, we can't do it. He just voted for the traditional infrastructure bill, which added over $200 billion to the deficit. So what are you talking about? You obviously don't have a concern about the deficit. You just voted for something that adds to the deficit. They are liars. They are scumbags. They are scammers. They are charlatans. In the case of Joe Manchin, he's serving his donors. In the case of Ben Shapiro, his whole job as a right-wing commentator is to defend the status quo and effectively protect these same corporations. And he trots out these idiotic arguments like leftism is morphine. First of all, no, it's not. Second of all, even if it was, based, and that's a lot better than snake oil, which is what you're selling.